I never imagined that the mountains I had trusted all my life would one day be covered in snow, nor that the son-in-law I had cherished like my own child, welcoming him into my home with open arms, would be the very one digging my grave within my own four walls, until that small, innocent-looking camera revealed the bitter truth before my eyes.
My daughter, Emily, the light of my life, when she married James, I felt as though fortune itself had smiled upon me. He wasn't only a loving husband to my daughter, but a fine young man whom I believed would also be like a true son to me. Always respectful, always kind. After losing my husband, in the depths of that aching loneliness, James became my lifeline. He would pop down to the Sunday market for me, mend a dripping tap, and sit for hours as I told him stories from the past, his warm and genuine smile never leaving his face, filling the empty corners of my heart. When little things around the house began to go missing, I blamed it on age and forgetfulness. Even when I mentioned it to James, he would reassure me, "My dear Mom, you're just tired, it's nothing." And I dismissed that fleeting, curious glimmer that sometimes appeared in his eyes. The small security camera my son David had bought for me, "Mom, you're living alone now. Better to be safe so we don't worry," he'd said, seemed like a needless gadget at first. How was I to know that this tiny device would tear away the veil from what I thought was a peaceful life, revealing the dark clouds above it and the hidden face of the man closest to me? For several days after placing it in the corner of the bookcase, I completely forgot about it. Life felt steady, ordinary, and I convinced myself everything was fine, pushing those troubling doubts deep into the back of my mind. Until that Saturday morning. As I dressed to attend the engagement party of our neighbor's daughter, I opened the case of the silver brooch, my late husband's only keepsake to me, only to find its velvet cradle empty. A sharp pang struck my heart. At first, I blamed it again on my age, rummaging through the house, telling myself I must have misplaced it. Perhaps it had snagged onto a scarf. But it was no use. Just as I was about to give up, the memory of that little camera returned to me like a faint whisper. Perhaps it held the answer. With trembling hands, I removed the tiny memory card and placed it into the tablet David had set up for me. Without realizing that the images would soon destroy my innocent little world and unveil the first act of a cruel betrayal, I pressed play, only hoping to see where I had left my brooch. But what I saw froze my blood. This wasn't mere curiosity. It was the trampling of dirty footprints over my private world, my memories, my trust. And at that moment, I knew. What had gone missing in my home was not just a brooch, but all the pure and unconditional love I had ever held for the man I once called my son.
In my mind, countless thoughts clashed. A part of me wished desperately that what I had seen was some mistake, yearning to believe in the kind young man I thought I knew. Yet another part of me froze in terror, afraid that by facing the cold truth, my daughter's world of happiness built on lies would come crashing down. When he opened the door, smiling with that familiar, cheerful warmth, it was almost impossible to reconcile him with the sly, calculating man I had just seen on the screen. And as I hugged him, only thought piercing my heart was the heavy weight of knowing that I alone could see the darkness hiding behind his false smile. As I spoke, my heart pounded as if it might break free of my chest. This was no innocent mention of something misplaced. It was beat, laid carefully as I looked into his eyes. A dangerous game designed to test his reaction, to see if that mask of false innocence might slip even for a second. When he handed me back the brooch, something he had clearly handled, perhaps even planned to steal, offering it as though it were a kindness, I didn't feel relief. I felt disgust, deep and raw. In that moment, I realized I was not just living with a thief, but with something far more dangerous. A man who manipulated emotions, who made you question your own sanity. From that day forward, my life was split in two. By day, I carried the unbearable weight of pretending everything was normal, playing out the farce of family bliss built on poisonous lies. By night, I became a shadow, chasing the truth, watching the silent films captured by that little camera. With every recording, my horror grew. This wasn't a single mistake or a moment of weakness. It was a cold, deliberate pattern. Whenever I left the house, he slipped into my room, rifling not only through my things, but through the letters and papers that told the story of my past and my future. The repeated secret phone calls I saw on those recordings became my greatest torment. Why was my room turned into a phone box? What did he have to hide that he couldn't say in his own home, in front of his wife? What other dark secrets were buried beneath that mask of a devoted son-in-law? And then came the moment I saw him slip money into his pocket. In that second, the last shred of mercy in me turned to ice. This was no longer doubt or a violation of trust. This was theft, blatant and shameless. He had even taken the money I had quietly set aside for my own funeral. It was proof, clear, cruel proof of his ingratitude and his heartlessness. I knew what he was doing, but it wasn't enough. I needed to know why and whether he was alone in this filth. And so I resolved that I needed not only eyes to see, but ears to hear, to give voice to this silent betrayal, to unearth the whispered, filthy secrets, and step on to a far more dangerous path.
For the first time in my life, I found myself walking down a dark path, hiding like a thief, ordering devices like a spy. And though there were moments when I questioned whether what I was doing was right, the need to uncover the bitter truth behind my daughter Emily's false happiness and to save her from the suffocating grip of this octopus-like danger outweighed all my fears and moral doubts. I realized then that what would catch him was not my wit or courage, but his arrogance,
his reckless confidence in disregarding my home, my room, my old age. That was why I chose to place the most modern trap in the most forgotten, dust-ridden corner of this shabby house, turning his pride into the very snare that would undo him. As I lied to my own son David for the first time, telling him a half-truth to protect his sister's home, the words caught in my throat. That day, I learned the helpless pain of a mother forced to deceive the child she loved most, all because of the person she had trusted most. It carved one of the deepest wounds a mother's heart could ever bear. When James, playing the role of the affectionate, unsuspecting son-in-law, pressed his lips to my cheek in what should have been a loving gesture, it felt like a frozen stain left on my skin. Only one thought echoed in my mind. The lies were finished. The trap was set, the curtain was about to fall. And now, hidden behind that wall, the little device was recording a truth that might shatter our lives to their very foundations, and I would face it alone. During the first minutes of silence, hearing nothing but the ordinary hum of the house, part of my heart prayed desperately that this would all prove baseless, that my suspicions were nothing more than the tricks of an aging mind, for sometimes clinging to a sweet lie is easier than confronting a bitter truth. But then came his voice, not in the gentle, respectful tone I had always known, but cold, detached, and using words no decent man should ever use to describe his own wife, as if he were speaking about an enemy, not a partner. In that moment, I saw the truth. My fears were not misplaced. I had not been paranoid. I had been living across the table from a dangerous monster. Each word that rang in my ears stripped away more than just my possessions. It tore down my memories, my future, and the thin veil of false respect he had always shown me. To him, I wasn't a mother to be cherished, but a weak old woman to be exploited, an easy target whose fading memory made her a fool. The pain of realizing this cut into me like a dagger. That was when I finally understood. His cruelty had no limits. He would not only steal my money, but also my dignity, my sanity, and worst of all, he would not hesitate for a moment to poison the sacred bond I shared with my daughter for the sake of his filthy ambitions. And so, the tears that streamed down my face were not for myself, but for Emily, my precious girl, who had no idea she was living in the coils of a venomous snake. For the sound of that treacherous voice stripped away my pity and sorrow, and in their place it clothed me in a burning armor, a mother's resolve to end this charade, to tear away the mask of the monster, and to protect her child, no matter the cost.
The moment I embraced my son David's strong, steady frame, I felt the crushing weight I had carried on my shoulders for weeks suddenly lift. His presence was like a safe harbor in the middle of a storm, a lantern in the darkness to guide me forward, and I knew then that I would no longer burn in this hell alone. Before I told him everything, he needed to understand the gravity of the moment, that what I was about to show him was not idle gossip or the paranoia of an aging mind. So I turned the quiet of the room into a kind of courtroom, preparing both him and myself for the weight and finality of the evidence. As I watched his face, it was like seeing a sped-up film of all the emotions I had endured these past weeks. I could see his anger rise, not only at the theft he witnessed, but at the vile desecration of the privacy of the home his father had built. In that instant, I knew we were both wounded by the same betrayal, though from different sides. When he heard how his sister Emily's happiness had been twisted into part of a filthy scheme, when he heard the degrading insults spat at his own mother, the cold, hard look that settled on his face was one I had never seen before. It was no longer the look of a wronged son, but of a man who had sworn to crush the serpent threatening his family. Hearing the firmness in his voice and feeling the warmth of his calloused hand against my trembling one, I realized for the first time in weeks that I could truly breathe. At last I could see a light at the end of the tunnel, and I knew that I would walk towards it, stronger than before, with my son standing behind me like a mountain. In his controlled anger, in the measured steps he took around the room, I recognized something far greater than a lust for revenge. It was the cold focus of a chess master, calculating his next move in silence. And at that moment I understood. His first thought was not to punish James, but to figure out how to free his sister from the coils of this poison with the least possible pain. His calm, reasoned words cut through the fog of my grief and fury. He was right. This delicate matter could not be solved with an axe, but with a scalpel. Our task was not to wound Emily, but to separate her carefully and gently from the venomous vines that had entwined her. When he spoke of turning James's own trap against him, I felt my skin prickle, for I knew it meant my home, where I had raised my children, where every corner held a memory, would now become a crime scene, my role reduced to bait in a cruel game, and the people I trusted most forced to play pawns in a ruthless strategy. To watch my house, once a place of warmth and safety, transform into an operations room bristling with hidden cameras, live feeds, and secret plans, was to learn painfully how betrayal turns not only hearts, but even the safest of homes into battlegrounds. And yet that evening, as I sipped a simple cup of tea with my son, it gave me more strength and peace than anything I had ever tasted in my life. For it was not just tea, it was proof that after tears had been shed, trust shattered, and dreams shaken, the unyielding strength of being a family could still be brewed anew.
As David examined the cold piece of technology he had placed on the table, instead of bringing me the warmth of a family visit, the strangeness of our situation struck me like a slap to the face. We were no longer a normal family dreaming of grandchildren. We had become a wounded unit, running a secret war inside our own home, planting surveillance devices to bring justice against the enemy who sat among us. Making the most painful phone call of my life, I found myself playing a calculated, ice-cold game against my own daughter. Every word pierced my heart like 1,000 needles, for each sentence was not a reassurance, but a carefully laid thread in a trap woven by my own hands, with the gentle voice of a mother to ensnare her happiness. I didn't need to hear what was said in that house to know. I could feel the poisonous thrill pumping through James's veins from miles away. My innocent Emily believed her mother was saving for the future, never realizing that the vulture beside her saw that money as nothing more than a ticket out of his debts, a ticket he would do anything to secure. To watch the old wardrobe where I had stored my wedding dress, my children's baby clothes, and the most treasured belongings of my life become a hiding place for a device, the centerpiece of a trap, was deeply unsettling. My bedroom, once a sacred space of memories, had turned into a crime scene where I was both prosecutor and victim. When every part of the plan was in place and all that was left to wait, the silence that settled over the house was more maddening than the loudest noise. Each hour that passed was the tick of a time bomb, counting down to that fateful Tuesday, the day my daughter would either open her heart or open her eyes. That weekend, our home felt like an island cut adrift from the flow of time. And though I should have felt the joy of being side by side with my son, we were nothing more than two companions in fate, bound by a dreadful secret, waiting for the storm we knew was coming. When I heard James's honeyed voice, dripping with poison, already placing himself at the center of the money before a single penny had even changed hands, I could scarcely breathe. That call wasn't a casual check-in. It was the hunter's final scan of the field, making sure his prey hadn't escaped. Proof, beyond doubt, of how impatient and dangerous he truly was. Listening to David, my honest boy, who had never been near a lie in his life, now laying out a plan as detailed and intricate as a seasoned playwright, filled me with sorrow. It was another bitter lesson in how one man's evil can drag even the most innocent hearts into dark, twisted paths. On that final night, as the weight of carrying the plan pressed down on me, my mother's heart rebelled. I was supposed to protect my child from pain, yet here I was, waiting in ambush to force her to face the deepest agony of her life. For a fleeting moment, I wondered if burying the truth forever and watching her live inside a lie might, in its own way, be the kinder choice. But David's steady voice and gentle words swept away my weakness. He reminded me that being a parent is not only about sharing joy, but about standing tall beside your child through the hardest truths, and that my role, when the moment came, was to hold Emily's hand tightly as she lay upon that metaphorical operating table and help cut this malignant tumor out of our lives once and for all. As David examined the cold piece of technology he had placed on the table, instead of bringing me the warmth of a family visit, the strangeness of our situation struck me like a slap to the face. We were no longer a normal family dreaming of grandchildren. We had become a wounded unit, running a secret war inside our own home, planting surveillance devices to bring justice against the enemy who sat among us. Making the most painful phone call of my life, I found myself playing a calculated, ice-cold game against my own daughter. Every word pierced my heart like 1,000 needles,
for each sentence was not a reassurance, but a carefully laid thread in a trap woven by my own hands with the gentle voice of a mother to ensnare her happiness. I didn't need to hear what was said in that house to know. I could feel the poisonous thrill pumping through James's veins from miles away. My innocent Emily believed her mother was saving for the future, never realizing that the vulture beside her saw that money as nothing more than a ticket out of his debts, a ticket he would do anything to secure. To watch the old wardrobe where I had stored my wedding dress, my children's baby clothes, and the most treasured belongings of my life become a hiding place for a device, the centerpiece of a trap, was deeply unsettling. My bedroom, once a sacred space of memories, had turned into a crime scene where I was both prosecutor and victim. When every part of the plan was in place and all that was left to wait, the silence that settled over the house was more maddening than the loudest noise. Each hour that passed was the tick of a time bomb, counting down to that fateful Tuesday, the day my daughter would either open her heart or open her eyes. That weekend, our home felt like an island cut adrift from the flow of time. And though I should have felt the joy of being side by side with my son, we were nothing more than two companions in fate, bound by a dreadful secret, waiting for the storm we knew was coming. When I heard James's honeyed voice, dripping with poison, already placing himself at the center of the money before a single penny had even changed hands, I could scarcely breathe. That call wasn't a casual check-in. It was the hunter's final scan of the field, making sure his prey hadn't escaped. Proof, beyond doubt, of how impatient and dangerous he truly was. Listening to David, my honest boy, who had never been near a lie in his life, now laying out a plan as detailed and intricate as a seasoned playwright, filled me with sorrow. It was another bitter lesson in how one man's evil can drag even the most innocent hearts into dark, twisted paths. On that final night, as the weight of carrying the plan pressed down on me, my mother's heart rebelled. I was supposed to protect my child from pain, yet here I was, waiting in ambush to force her to face the deepest agony of her life. For a fleeting moment, I wondered if burying the truth forever and watching her live inside a lie might, in its own way, be the kinder choice. But David's steady voice and gentle words swept away my weakness. He reminded me that being a parent is not only about sharing joy, but about standing tall beside your child through the hardest truths, and that my role, when the moment came, was to hold Emily's hand tightly as she lay upon that metaphorical operating table and help cut this malignant tumor out of our lives once and for all.
That morning, as I stared out of the car window at the ordinary lives flowing past, I felt like a fish gazing at the world from inside an aquarium, For we were no longer part of those carefree people. We were soldiers in a secret war no one else knew existed, driving not to a family gathering, but towards a mission that would bring about our own household's ruin. The money I had worked and saved for all my life, meant to secure my children's future, no longer felt like a safeguard in my hands. It had turned into a curse, no longer the promise of a peaceful retirement, but the pin of a bomb, a weapon with which I would wound my daughter Emily's heart, the shroud for our family's innocence. When I shut the wardrobe door, it wasn't just a piece of furniture I was closing. I knew I was shutting away forever a time of happiness and innocence. Behind that door now lay not only the money, but the bitter truth about to be revealed, the dream soon to collapse, and the ghost of an uncertain future. Listening as David gently lured his sister, still blissfully unaware, into the trap we had built with such care, I felt the helplessness only a mother can know. For one of my children was forced to betray the other in order to protect her, and I stood there as both the director and the most tormented spectator of this dreadful play. That final hour of waiting felt like an eternity. The silence in the house was not calm, but the hush before a storm. And as I sat on the armchair, my heart battering against my ribs, I knew I wasn't only waiting for my daughter to walk through the door, I was waiting for our old life to walk out of it forever. The moment Emily entered, carrying a cake and glowing with innocent joy, I felt a pang I will never forget. Her pure happiness was like the most beautiful flower blooming on the edge of a cliff, blissfully unaware that we were about to place the dynamite at its roots, pushing her off in order to save her. When she laughed, calling the moment a coincidence, the word rang in my ears like the toll of a cold victory bell. It meant our plan was working flawlessly, but it also meant we were one step closer to cutting a wound deep into her heart. Watching David deliver his carefully rehearsed lie, every word weighed and measured, and seeing James so eager to play his part. "You go on, I'll keep Emily company," he said with such willingness. I felt like a spectator in the front row of a ghastly theater performance. The only difference was that no blood would be spilled on this stage, yet hearts would bleed all the same. When I embraced my daughter, I knew I owed her both an apology and a farewell. For when I stepped out of that door, I was leaving behind not only my precious child, but every truth she had believed in, every safe harbor she had trusted, and the false paradise she had built her dreams upon, setting them all ablaze in the process. The cramped, silent car suddenly felt like the largest and tensest cinema hall in the world. We sat in breathless anticipation, waiting for the curtain to rise on a play staged inside our own home, a play in which the leading roles would be played by those dearest to us, and whose ending would change the rest of our lives forever.
Through that tiny screen, I watched how brilliantly James staged his false illness, turning Emily's purest, most compassionate feelings into stepping stones for his sordid schemes. It was then I truly understood what we were up against. Not merely a liar, but a master manipulator, a man who engineered emotions as if they were machines. To see him moving with such ease inside my most private space,
The room where decades of memories were stored felt like an invasion not only of my home, but of my very soul. These were not the steps of a lost man, but of a ruthless thief who knew exactly what he wanted and how to get it. To witness at once the devilish glee on his face as he found the money, and to hear my daughter's innocent voice calling out to him as she entered with a glass of water, was like watching a glimpse of hell unfold on earth. In that moment, innocence and betrayal existed under the same roof, about to collide in seconds, and I could do nothing but watch. Time itself seemed to stop, to see through that screen the look in Emily's eyes shift from tender curiosity to horror and disbelief. Like a mountain collapsing under unexpected snow was the sharpest blade ever thrust into a mother's heart, and it pierced straight through mine. Even in his panic, he tried to spin a lie. That was the final, undeniable proof of how rotten he really was. For it wasn't a desperate defense. It was the vilest insult to her intelligence and her love. The first lightning strike of the storm about to break. Emily's cry that followed was not just a shout of anger. It was the sound of a soul shattering, a heart breaking into pieces, of every truth she had trusted crumbling like glass. That cry shot through the silence of our car like a bullet, leaving us breathless. Watching him hide his vile betrayal behind crocodile tears, hearing him mutter, "I never meant to hurt you," I realized again how far he had fallen from humanity. It was not remorse. It was the coward's last excuse, the whimper of a criminal begging for leniency after being caught. But then I saw the spark in Emily's eyes. In that flash, I recognized the strength of my own blood. She was no longer the deceived girl, but a woman forged in the fire of betrayal, an iron-willed phoenix, standing tall, ready to tear the man who had shamed her out of her life like a rag. The sound of that door closing was more than just someone leaving. It was the end of an era. The pestilence that had infected our home was gone, but the silence, the wreckage, and the wound carved into my daughter's spirit would take far longer to heal than simply banishing him. The cruelest, most agonizing part of our plan was now complete, and in its place, a holier duty remained: to lift our broken girl from the ruins, to help her stand again, and to remind her that true family is not defined by perfection, but by holding one another even tighter when the world comes crashing down. For the real healing had only just begun.
That day, as I stepped once more across the threshold of the home that had once been my sanctuary, I felt like a stranger. The walls seemed to breathe with sorrow, their silence heavy against my skin. For our house was no longer the refuge of laughter and memories. It had been turned into a battlefield, scarred by betrayal and destruction. There were no words to say, no comfort to offer. Some wounds cannot be mended by phrases, only by the quiet, unconditional presence of love. And so David and I wrapped our broken Emily in a wall of flesh and blood, shielding her shattered heart as best we could. In those few silent seconds of shared glances, more was said than in hours of conversation. Emily knew then why we had lied to her, why we had built this trap, and why we had led her to this cruel end. And instead of anger, what I saw in her was the helpless surrender of a soul that at least understood she was not alone in the darkness. As I watched David dismantle the hidden cameras one by one, the devices that had trapped James in his own deceit, it felt as though the oppressive atmosphere pressing down on our house began to lift. It was not merely the removal of wires and lenses. It was the first step in transforming our house from a courtroom and a prison back into a place of healing, a home where wounds could finally be tended. That evening, we drank tea together in silence. It had no taste, no sweetness, yet it was the most meaningful tea I had ever shared, for it was the first flame of hope lit upon the ruins, a fragile warmth we huddled around, bound by necessity, by survival, by love. But Emily's innocent questions pierced me like a slap. They revealed the true cost of his betrayal. It was not only the money or the keepsakes stolen. It was her past, her memories, and her faith in herself. The cruelest theft is not of possessions, but of the happiness one believed to be real. David's actions that night may have seemed harsh, but they were as necessary as antiseptic on a wound, painful, yet essential to cleanse. The poisonous recording seared away the last maybes, the final fragments of false hope, giving Emily the strength she needed to walk away without looking back. Her 2 words, "I want a divorce," were far more than a decision. They were the manifesto of a woman reborn, the first step of a soul reclaiming control of her life, the first and most vital victory against the man who had deceived her. In that moment, I felt pride swell in me once again. When I looked at David, I no longer saw the boy I had once cradled. I saw a steadfast oak tree, roots deep and unshaken, standing tall to shield his family in the storm. He was our anchor, our safe harbor, the greatest blessing given to us in the midst of hell. And as I watched my daughter finally fall asleep, her face softened into innocence once more, I knew her marriage, nothing more than a nightmare, was over. Ahead lay a new life, perhaps hard but honest. And within me, despite the ache, a tiny light of hope began to flicker. For our family had not been destroyed. On the contrary, it had been strengthened, cleansed of its rot. Together, we would bind our wounds and rise from the wreckage stronger than before.
That morning, when we awoke, the air of mourning still lingered in the house, yet it was no longer weighed down by despair, but by a painful resolve. We all knew the time for tears had passed. Now was the time to clear the wreckage, cleanse the wounds, and take those hardest, most agonizing steps forward. Watching Emily sign the official papers to end the marriage that had shattered her life, my heart ached, but it also swelled with indescribable pride. For that signature was not merely a legal formality, it was a declaration of independence, a woman reclaiming the captain's seat of her own ship, steering her course away from a storm of lies towards calmer, truer waters. As I waited at home, my mind and heart were with her. I could imagine the courage it took to step back into that house, every corner woven with deceit, to gather the remnants of her life from among objects that were never memories, but stage props. Each step she took was like treading on shards of glass, cutting her soul as she walked. When she left her wedding ring behind, it was more than surrender. It was the deliberate breaking of the final chain. She chose to leave behind everything that tied her to him, all the good and the bad, and walk away carrying only her honor and her true self. She went in as his wife, but she left as Emily once more. That evening when she came through my door, it was unlike any other return. She was no longer a guest or a daughter visiting her mother. She was a traveler seeking refuge after the storm, and my home was once again her harbor, her place of healing. Sometimes a life must end before one can truly return to the home where it all began. As the sharp sting of betrayal slowly cooled in the merciful flow of time, we discovered again the healing power of life's simplest moments. A morning coffee shared, the sprouting of a flower in the garden, a few quiet words exchanged. These became the most magical medicine for our deepest wounds. What we later heard of James, that he had vanished into the night, swallowed by his debts, fleeing the city, brought us no joy, no satisfaction. For once you have purged the poison from your life, you no longer care in which gutter the snake is crawling. All that matters is the garden you saved, greening and blooming once more. The greatest lesson this trial taught me was not how destructive betrayal can be, but how it revealed the true character of my children. I saw the daughter I thought fragile rise as an unshakable fortress of steel. I saw the son I had always trusted stand like an unyielding oak, shielding his family in the storm. That was my deepest comfort and my proudest moment. That little camera entered our lives like an uninvited guest, forcing us to remove the rose-tinted glasses we clung to. It was a ruthless teacher, revealing truths we dreaded to face. Yet now I see that sometimes the truths we fear most are more liberating than the sweetest lies. Only when the walls fall can you step out into the wide, bright sky and realize how much freedom lies above you. Yes, this was a story of betrayal, but it was also a story of rebirth, of family, of rising stronger together from beneath the rubble. We learned that the fiercest storms sometimes come only to tear away the rotten roofs, so that later, together, we can build anew on foundations of honesty and love, a home more steadfast than ever before.